Studio 33 AD, Catholic Media.
This is actually a quite stunning passage in today's Gospel from John. We could speak on it for many hours, but today I'd just like to unpack a few nuggets of it for us. First, the love of the Father for the Son is perfect in every way. It is unconditional and all-consuming. It is agape. It's complete and selfless. In receiving the Father's love, Jesus receives all he needs. The second, the love Jesus receives from the Father cannot be contained. It cannot be kept for himself. The love of the Father is such that it overflows from Jesus' heart. It is this overflowing love that gushes from the heart of Jesus to us. Thirdly, a key thing to ponder in this is that overflowing love now given to us cannot be contained within us either. It must overflow from our hearts to everyone we encounter. Therefore, if we are to be true recipients of the love of the Father and the Son, we must in turn allow that love to gush forth onto others in an unlimited and unconditional way. Think about it for a moment. Unlimited and unconditional. Is that even truly possible? Is it possible to be so radical and absolute in our love for others? It is, my dear friends, possible only if the love we speak originates in the heart of the Father, given to the Son, and then poured over us to scatter freely among the people of the world. Jesus, God himself, teaches us the nature of love. Love is self-giving. The greater the self-giving, the greater the love. A man can have no greater love than to lay down his life for his friends. When we put our lives at the service of others, when we live in order to give and not to take, when we are willing to suffer so that someone else can rejoice, then we may call ourselves disciples. Just to make sure we don't misunderstand this lesson, Jesus illustrated it by his own suffering and death. He accepted mockery, humiliation, torture, rejection, injustice, misunderstanding, betrayal, and finally death. Not because he was too weak to resist, but to show us what love really is. Agape. Self-giving, self-forgetting generosity. Jesus Christ hanging on the cross, bearing the weight of our sins and the punishment these sins have earned, thinking not of himself but of the souls he came to save, even pleading for their forgiveness up until the very end. This is love. This is agape. Far from warm fuzzies and dreamy emotions, the love of Christ, and therefore the love of the Christian, is a love that gives without counting the cost, a love that gives without ever asking for something in return, a love that gives and gives and gives, just like God. St. Augustine said, "The measure of love is love without measure, and the more it gives, the more it has. The more it loves, the better it loves." We learn to love by loving. When we learn this lesson of true love, of self-giving, we tap into the inexhaustible source of fortitude and courage, which is God himself. Perhaps this is what filled Jackie Hamill in 1992. The service was over. Jackie Hamill, a young Australian prison evangelist, was excited about what God was doing. She had felt the love of Jesus out to these inmates, given it to them. Jackie and 14 members of her church had traveled to the Philippines to minister in a military prison there. They were concerned for the lost souls of the inmates, many of whom were communist guerrillas in prison for murder. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by sounds of gunfighting and gunshots. The inmates were rioting and had overpowered the guards, seizing their guns and ammunition to make an escape. The missionaries were taken hostage and held for 3 days. During this time, Jackie and another girl were beaten and raped daily, repeatedly. But even in the moments they suffered the greatest shame, Jackie prayed for her captors and spoke to them about the depth of God's love. Her beaten face did not show panic, revulsion, or hatred, but glowed with brightness of God's light. During her imprisonment, she led the team in singing God's praises and presented the gospel of God's love to her captors. One of the rioting inmates threw down his gun and received the love of Christ and was killed. On the third day, there was a shootout between the prisoners and the soldiers who came to stop the riot. Jackie and her friend Juliet, a 16-year-old, were shot. Even as Jackie lay dying, she raised her hands to God, praying for the rioting inmates and for the soldiers. She died singing to God, singing his praises of love. Jackie went to the extreme in her love for Christ, like God did by handing over his Son for us. A few weeks ago, I preached and explained to everyone that we cannot live in peace in this world. We can have peace in our hearts, but we are not of this world. We are in it. The first century apologist Diognetus says this about the Christians in the world. Christians love all men, but all men persecute them. Condemned because they are not understood, they are put to death, but raised to life again. They live in poverty, but enrich many. They are totally destitute, but possess an abundance of everything. They suffer dishonor, but that is their glory. They are defamed, but vindicated. A blessing is their answer to abuse, deference their response to insult. For the good they do, they receive the punishment of malefactors. But even then, they rejoice as though receiving the gift of life. My brothers and sisters, we are not of this world. We live in it, but we bring God's love to every creature we encounter.
Studio 33 AD, Catholic Media.